Good afternoon and welcome to the College of Continuing and Professional Studies webinar, A Smarter Approach to Digital Marketing. Thank you so much for joining us. Next slide, please. My name is Shanta Bulai, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. If you have future questions about this webinar or other programs we offer, the college's contact information will be on the last slide of this presentation. So I am delighted to introduce the topic for today's webinar, A Smarter Approach to Digital Marketing. This webinar explores practical, easy to implement strategies that make digital marketing more effective without adding unnecessary complexity. Rather than focusing on every new tool or trend, this session highlights smarter ways to leverage existing platforms to streamline efforts and maximize impact. Participants will gain insights into simplifying their approach while making their strategic marketing decisions with greater efficiency and confidence. Through real-world examples and clear frameworks, you'll learn how to focus on high-value activities, eliminate wasted effort, and create more intentional, result-driven digital presence. By the end of the session, participants will be able to assess current digital marketing efforts and pinpoint specific areas where processes can be simplified and optimized. Apply practical strategies to increase engagement using current platforms and tools. Evaluate marketing activities to prioritize high-impact initiatives over low-value tasks. And lastly, develop a simplified strategic action plan to improve efficiency and measurable results. It's a pleasure to introduce the presenter for today's webinar, Sarah Felmet. Sarah is a marketing strategist and educator with expertise in brand management, marketing operations, and content creation. She develops innovative curricula and learning experiences that integrate technology, AI, and ethical marketing practices. Sarah empowers students and professionals to apply marketing principles in real-world contexts, fostering authenticity, consumer trust, and meaningful brand connections. Sarah, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today, and I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Shanta, for that wonderful introduction. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. And just to reiterate, my name is Sarah Felmet, and this webinar is titled A Smarter Approach to Digital Marketing. And essentially what the webinar is for is we all use digital technology, some form or another, in our workplace. But sometimes we get really tied up with the digital technology, and sometimes we are doing things in the workplace that aren't really having that kind of return on investment for us, right? Because we're so focused or hyper focused on digital technology. So this seminar will discuss 6 strategies that can be used to assist with this to sort of tighten how you use digital marketing in the workplace. So the first strategy is simplifying your digital marketing ecosystem. Before we get started, I want you to just grab your cell phones and shoot this QR code and just enter some thoughts on what you see are the biggest issues with using digital marketing in the workplace. I'm going to leave this QR code up for a couple seconds, and then I'm actually going to switch over so that everybody can see each other's responses. So I'd love to see everyone's thoughts. So again, there's consistency, time consuming. There's too many options. Like I mentioned before, absolutely, there's too many options. Staffing, I see staffing on there as one, right? So how do you know who to assign to different things? Too much information, where to start. There's restrictions. I'm glad that somebody put that in because some companies do have restrictions. And then let's see what else is on there. Oversaturated, right? There's a lot going on in the digital world. It becomes oversaturated. I see somebody put the new shiny thing. That's, yeah, for sure, right? Because when we look at AI, and this webinar is not really about AI, but when we look at AI, it's kind of the new shiny thing, right? So thank you all so much for sharing your wonderful thoughts on that. And let me go ahead and reshare the webinar slides. So again, thanks so much for sharing your ideas on what is just kind of bogging you down when it comes to digital marketing. So let's start with something that I think a lot of us can relate to, feeling like we're using too many tools and still not getting better results. I know a couple of y'all put that in there on the forum just now, so definitely great segue into this, right? So digital marketing today can get really complicated really fast. So the goal here is to simplify, not add more. First, you'd want to audit your current platforms. Take a step back and ask, what am I actually using right now and why? A lot of times we've added tools over time, but never stopped to evaluate if we still need them. For example, you might have one tool for email, another for scheduling, social posts, a third for analytics, but you're only using 30% of each. That's a good sign it's time to reassess. Next, you want to identify some redundancies. This is where you look for overlap, so basically tools that are doing the same thing. A simple example is if you're using one platform to schedule social media posts, but your CRM already has a feature that's built in, you may be doubling your effort unnecessarily. Then you want to consolidate where possible. The fewer tools you're managing, the easier your workflow becomes. This reduces cost, it saves time, and honestly just lowers your stress. Think about it like this. Instead of logging into 5 different systems every day, what if you could do most of your work in one or two? Now, focus on platforms where your audience is actually active. This is a big one. We often feel pressure to be everywhere. And that's not just in the workplace, but even in our personal lives. There's TikTok, there's LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, but your audience probably isn't everywhere. For example, if you're targeting professionals, LinkedIn might outperform TikTok by a mile. So instead of spreading yourself thin across the 5 platforms, double down on the one that's actually working. And finally, reduce what I like to call the shiny object syndrome, right? Again, perfect segue because somebody actually put that into the forum before. Just because you have a new tool or a platform and it's trending, it doesn't mean that it's right for you. We've all been there, signing up for something new because it looks exciting, only to use it twice and forget about it. A good rule of thumb is this. If it doesn't clearly improve your results or save you time, it's probably adding unnecessary complexity. So overall, this is about being more intentional, fewer tools, clearer focus, and a system that actually supports your goals instead of overwhelming you. Let's take a look at a great example in simplifying your marketing ecosystem with GlowShare. GlowShare didn't try to be everywhere all at once. Instead, they focused heavily on Instagram and their community channels. By doing this, they weren't spreading themselves too thin, which allowed them to create stronger engagement and higher brand loyalty. Another smart thing they did was leverage user-generated content, or as we call it, UGC. They encouraged their fans to share their experiences and photos, which GlowShare then amplified. This meant they didn't need to produce a ton of original content for every platform. They let their community do it for them, which also made marketing feel more authentic. And finally, by concentrating on just a few key channels, GlowShare could closely track what was working and optimize their strategy in real time. They weren't distracted by low-performing platforms. They could double down on what actually drove results. So the takeaway here is simple. Simplicity can drive impact. Focusing on fewer channels, engaging your community, and monitoring performance closely can often be trying to do everything at once. Now let's move to the next strategy. Strategy 2 is focusing on high impact channels. Now that we've talked about simplifying our tools, the next step is making sure we're focusing our effort in the right places, because not all channels are created equally. So first, use data to identify your top performing channels. This is really about moving away from the guesswork and looking at what's actually working. Instead of asking, where should we be? Start asking, where are we already seeing results? That might be website conversions, email signups, or even direct sales. For example, you might find that Instagram brings in a lot of likes, but your email campaigns are what actually drives purchases. That's a really important distinction. What leads to the next point, which leads to the next point, double down on what drives conversions, not just traffic. Traffic is great, except if you're driving, of course, but traffic is great, but if it's not turning leads or sales, it's not doing much for your business. A simple example, let's say your blog gets thousands of visits, but your LinkedIn posts bring in actual client inquiries. The smarter move is to invest more time and energy into LinkedIn because that's where the real impact is happening. Next, align your channels with funnel stages. Different platforms are better suited for different parts of the customer journey. Some channels are great for awareness, like social media or YouTube, while others, like email or retargeting ads, are better for actual conversions. So instead of expecting every channel to do everything, you let each one play into its strength. Then eliminate or pause underperforming platforms. This can be a tough one, but it's important. If a channel consistently isn't delivering results, even after testing and tweaking, it's okay to step back. For example, if you've been posting on a platform for months with little engagement or no conversions, it might not be worth the ongoing effort right now. And finally, reallocate your budget toward ROI positive channels. This is where everything comes together. Once you know what's working, you shift your time and energy and budget into those areas to maximize growth. So instead of spreading your resources thin across 5 or 6 platforms, you're intentionally investing in the 2 or 3 that actually move the needle. At the end of the day, this is about strategic, putting your effort where it matters most and letting go of what doesn't. Let's look at a real world example. Let's look at Airbnb as an example of focusing on high impact channels. Instead of pouring money into paid advertising everywhere, Airbnb made a strategic shift towards SEO and organic growth. The result? Lower acquisition costs and a much more stable way to scale. So, how did they do it? First, they invested in content and user experience. They created optimized landing pages for each city and property type, making it easier for people to find exactly what they were looking for. They also leveraged community and referral programs. Happy hosts and guests become organic promoters, sharing Airbnb with friends and family, which naturally drove more bookings without extra ad spending. Finally, Airbnb was data driven. They closely monitored which organic strategies brought the most bookings and doubled down on them instead of spreading efforts across multiple channels. The lesson here is focusing on the channels that deliver the most impact, like Airbnb's SEO and organic strategy, can give you more growth for spending less. It also creates a marketing engine that's sustainable over the long term. Now that we've explored the high impact channels, let's look at strategy 3. Strategy 3 is to have content that works harder. Let's talk about content, because one of the biggest mistakes in digital marketing is thinking we need to create more of it. In reality, the goal is to make your content work harder for you. So first, repurpose content across formats. This is one of the easiest ways to save time and increase impact. Instead of constantly creating something new, you take one strong piece of content and adapt it. For example, a blog post can become a series of social media posts, a short video, or even an email newsletter. You're not starting from scratch. You're just extending its reach. Next, prioritize evergreen content over constant new posts. Evergreen content is content that stays relevant over time. So instead of chasing trends every week, you're building assets that continue to bring in traffic and value months or even years later. A simple example is a how-to guide or FAQ page that will likely keep performing much longer than a trend-based post. Instead of asking, what should we post? Ask, what does our audience need help with? For example, if you're hearing the same question from customers over and over, that's a perfect opportunity to turn it into a blog, video, or social post. Now, use a pillar or cluster strategy for SEO. This just means organizing your content in a more strategic way. You create one main piece of content, a pillar, on a core topic, and then support it with related pieces that link back to it. For example, you might have a main guide on digital marketing basics, and then smaller pieces on email marketing, social media, and SEO that are all connected to it. This helps improve your visibility in search and makes content easier to navigate. And finally, measure engagement, not just the volume of output. It's not about how much content you produce, it's about how well it performs. So instead of saying we posted 20 times this month, the better question is, did people actually engage with it? Are they clicking? Are they commenting? Are they sharing? Is this actually converting? Because one high performing piece of content is far more valuable than 10 that no one interacts with. So, overall, this is about being more intentional, creating less content, but making it go further and work smarter for you. So, let's look at an example. Let's talk about HubSpot, right? Hopefully, we all know about HubSpot. HubSpot is an example of content that works harder. HubSpot doesn't just create content for the sake of content. They make every piece double down or even triple down. For example, a single blog post can be repurposed into emails, social posts, webinars, videos, or even downloadable guides. This approach maximizes value without constantly creating new assets. They also focus on SEO and evergreen content, meaning their resources continue to attract traffic long after they're published. It's not about short-term engagement, it's about creating content that keeps giving. And finally, HubSpot ensures every piece of content is integrated into the marketing funnel. From calls to action to downloadable resources, each asset captures leads and drives results. So, what's the takeaway? When your content works harder, it does more than inform or engage. It directly contributes to growth and revenue, all while reducing wasted effort. Now, let's move on to the fourth strategy. The fourth strategy is smarter use of automation. But before we move on to the fourth strategy, let's get some opinions. I'm going to stop sharing and then pull up the other QR code. And then we'll switch like we did before. So please take a moment to click on the QR code and rank the strategies or your goals for your organization from 1 as most important to 5 as least important. I like the results are coming in. Make sure when you rank them that you do hit submit at the bottom. That way I can kind of see the updates. All right. So maintaining human touch points for high value interactions is the number 1 at the moment. Let's see what is the least. Avoid over automation. Absolutely. That's something we're about to get into right now. So freeing up time by letting the systems handle routine manual activities. Absolutely, right? Because we want our systems to work for us so that it does free time on our hands to be able to actually engage or create some of that content. All right, I will give it just another couple of seconds. I love that the maintain human touch points is still at number 1. Absolutely. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop this at the moment. So thank everybody for jumping in and sharing. I see that about 40 people were able to jump on there and sharing. There's one more typing, so I'm going to go ahead and let that one go. All right, so let me go ahead and stop it at the moment. So it seems the question is, when implementing automation, which of these strategies or goals do you prioritize most? And you all ranked it from 1 being the most important, 5 to the least important. So the results were 1, that it's important to maintain human touch points for high value interactions. Absolutely, right? And again, this webinar is not based on AI, it's based on just digital strategy. But when we are incorporating AI, we want to make sure that it is still human driven, right? And it's AI supported. Number 2 is deliver more relevant messaging through segmentation and behavior-based triggers. Absolutely. If we understand our target market, then we're able to deliver the relevant messages that focus on that target market. Number three was automate repetitive tasks. Yep, we talked a little bit about that, right? If we can do email sequences, if we can use automation to kind of do some scheduling and the reporting, that frees time for us. Avoid over automation was number four, yes, and that's something we're going to talk a little bit about. And then fifth, as least important, was free up time by letting the systems handle routine and manual activities. And while that is important, obviously all of these are important, right? You all probably felt that it's least important to free up some of that time. Maybe that doesn't really require a lot of time in your company, or maybe it's actually already automated. So thank you all for sharing your wonderful thoughts on that. So let me go back to the slideshow. All right. So again, thank you so much for sharing that. It was really interesting to see as the marks kind of moved up and down, but I feel like everybody kind of was on the same page when it came to the human interaction component. So right, so let's talk about automation because that's what that was all about, right? And several of you indicated you want to avoid that over automation. So let's talk about automation because when it's used well, it can save you a ton of time. But when it's overdone, it can actually hurt your brand. So the goal here is to automate the right things while still keeping that human connection, much like what we just saw on that poll. Okay. So first, you want to automate repetitive tasks. Think about all of the small manual things you do every day, spending time following up on emails, scheduling posts, pulling reports. These are perfect candidates for automation. For example, instead of manually sending a welcome email to every new subscriber, you can set up an email sequence that does it automatically. It saves time and ensures consistency. Next, use segmentation to personalize at scale. Automation doesn't mean sending the same message to everyone. It actually allows you to be more targeted. By grouping your audience based on behavior interests, you can send more relevant messages. On the poll, we just saw a little bit about segmentation, right? So use your segmentation or your target market to assist with that automation. For instance, someone who just signed up for your newsletter should get a very different message than someone who's already made a purchase. Then you want to set up trigger-based campaigns. This is where automation gets really powerful. Instead of sending messages on a fixed schedule, you're responding to what people actually do. A simple example, if someone abandons their cart on your website, they automatically receive a follow-up email. Several companies actually already do this. Or if they download a guide, they get a related piece of content next. It's timely, relevant, and much more effective. Now, avoid over automation that feels robotic. While we've all received emails that feel clearly automated and not in a good way, right? The key is to make sure your messaging still sounds natural and human. Even if it's automated, it should feel like it was written for the person receiving it, not just blasted out to everyone. And finally, keep human touch points where it matters most, as we just saw in the poll. Not everything should be automated. High value interactions like responding to a serious inquiry, handling a customer issue, or building a relationship should still be personal. For example, if a potential client reaches out with a detailed question, it's not something you want to hand off to automation. That's an opportunity to connect directly with that potential client. So overall, automation should support your strategy, not replace the human element. As I indicated before, if you're using AI, right, your content should be human driven, but AI supported. When done right, it helps you work more efficiently and deliver a better experience. Let's look at a real world example. So you all know of Spotify. Spotify is an example of using automation smarter, not just more. Spotify doesn't automate for automation's sake. They use data and AI to deliver experiences that feel personal. Take their playlists like Discover Weekly or Daily Mix. These aren't just random suggestions. They're automatically generated based on your listening habits, which keeps users engaged and coming back week after week. They also use automated notifications and campaigns. Users get emails or push alerts about new releases from artists they follow without anyone on the marketing team having to hit send. And it's all data driven. Spotify constantly tracks what works and fine tunes its algorithms to ensure automation actually drives engagement and retention instead of sending generic, irrelevant messages. So, what's the key takeaway here from Spotify? Smarter automation is about creating personalized, efficient, and impactful experiences rather than just reducing manual work. Now, let's look at the fifth strategy. The fifth strategy is being able to use data-driven decision-making without feeling overwhelmed. On the first poll that we did today, several people indicated that they feel overwhelmed when they think of using digital strategy in the workplace. So let's talk about data, because while it's incredibly powerful, it can also feel completely overwhelming if you're looking at it too much. The goal here isn't to track everything, it's to focus on what actually matters. So, first, identify 3 to 5 core KPIs. Instead of tracking dozens of metrics, narrow it down to a small set that directly connects to your goals. For example, if your goal is growth, your KPIs might be leads generated, several of the conversion rates, or cost per acquisition. That's much more manageable and meaningful than trying to track everything at once. Next, avoid vanity metrics. There are numbers that look good on the surface, but don't really drive business results. Things like likes, impressions, or page views can be helpful, but only if they lead to something more. For instance, getting 1,000 likes on a post feels great, but if it doesn't lead to clicks, signups, or sales, it's not actually moving the needle, which is what you want for your business. Then you want to use dashboards to simplify reporting. Instead of pulling data from multiple places, bring it all into one clear, easy to read view. This helps you quickly understand what's happening without getting lost in spreadsheets. Think of it as turning complex data into a simple snapshot you can actually act on. Now, run small tests instead of large, risky changes. You don't need to overhaul your entire strategy to improve results. Instead, test small changes like adjusting a subject line, changing a call to action, or trying a different image. For example, you might test 2 versions of an email to see which one gets more clicks before rolling it out more broadly. You can also utilize your staff at work. You can ask staff which of the content they feel is going to be more relevant for your customers or for your potential clients. And finally, turn insights into action quickly. Data is only valuable if you actually use it. So when you see something working or not working, make adjustments in real time. If a campaign is performing well, lean into it. If something isn't working, pivot quickly instead of letting it run too long. So overall, this is about simplifying your relationship with data, focusing on what matters, testing thoughtfully, and using insights into continuously improving without feeling overwhelmed, like so many of you all said on the polls that we've done today. So let's look at a practical example. Netflix, right? We all know Netflix. The majority of us probably have a Netflix account. Netflix is an example of making data-driven decisions without feeling overwhelmed. Netflix collects an enormous amount of data, as you can imagine, but they don't try to act on everything. Instead, they focus on key metrics, things that truly impact engagement, retention, and content performance. This keeps their decision-making focused and manageable. They also use actionable dashboards and A/B testing to simplify decisions. Teams can quickly test ideas, see results, and implement changes without getting lost in numbers. And while data informs which shows or movies to produce or promote, Netflix balances it with creative judgment. This combination ensures the data guides decisions without taking away flexibility or innovation. The takeaway from Netflix? With the right focus and tools, data driven decision making does not have to be overwhelming. It can make your marketing smarter, faster, and more confident. Now for the sixth and final strategy in this webinar. Strategy 6 is building a lean and strategic action plan. Now is where we bring everything together, because all of this only works if you turn it into a clear, focused plan. And the key here is a lean and strategic plan, which is not overly complicated. First, define clear goals tied to business outcomes. Your marketing efforts should always connect back to something meaningful, like revenue or growth or retention. So instead of saying we want more engagement, a stronger goal might be we want to generate 50 qualified leads per month. That clarity makes it much easier to stay focused and measure goals. You can also apply the SMART goal principle, as I'm sure you've all done. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time. SMART goals allows us to actually have a specific goal that is achievable, and it gives us a specific time within which to achieve it. Using that example again, we want to generate 50 qualified leads per month. It is a very specific goal because it's 50 qualified leads. It is very measurable because you can certainly use some KPIs to measure that. It seems very achievable, maybe depending on your company. It's very relevant to the world of marketing because we're generating qualified leads. And there's a time factor attached to it because it says generate 50 qualified leads per month. Next, prioritize high value activities. Not everything you do in marketing carries the same weight. This is where the 80-20 rule comes in. Usually, a small number of actions drive the majority of your results. For example, you might find that email campaigns and referrals drive most of your leads, while other activities take time but don't deliver much return. That's where your focus should go. Then you'd want to create a simple, repeatable marketing workflow. Instead of reinventing the wheel every time, build a process that you can follow consistently. This might look like a monthly content plan, a weekly check-in on metrics, and a clear system for launching campaigns. The goal is to make execution easier and more predictable. Now, schedule regular reviews and optimizations. Marketing isn't a set it and forget it situation. It's constantly growing and evolving. You want to regularly take a step back, look at what's working, and make adjustments. For example, once a month, you might review your top performing channels, content, and campaigns, and decide where to refine or double down. If you're running an ad, for example, you might run your ad for 2 weeks and then take a look at the data metrics and figure out if the ad's working. If it's working, great. Maybe you want to extend that ad. If it's not working, figure out what's not working in the ad, fix those issues, and then redo the ad. And finally, eliminate tasks that don't drive results. This is where you really create space for what matters. If something consistently isn't contributing to your goals, it's okay to let it go. For instance, if you're spending hours each week on a platform that isn't generating engagements or leads, that time could be better spent elsewhere. So overall, this is about being intentional, setting clear goals, having a focused effort, and using simple systems that lead to continuous improvement. That's what allows you to work smarter, market sharper, and ultimately grow faster. Now let's look at one final example. Dollar Shave Club. is a great example of building a lean, strategic action plan. They didn't try to be everything to everyone. Instead, they focused on clear value proposition, affordable, convenient razors delivered straight to your door. This clarity made marketing and messaging much simpler and much more effective. Next, they prioritized high impact activities. Viral video campaigns, referral programs, and subscription retention became their main efforts and their main focus, rather than spreading resources across every possible channel. And importantly, they took an iterative, measurable approach. Campaigns were tested, results tracked, and strategies refined quickly. This lean workflow ensured that every action drove meaningful results without unnecessary complexity. The lesson here is simple. Focus on what matters most, measure, and iterate. A lean strategic plan can deliver more impact than trying to do it all at once. So let's summarize. Let's look at some key takeaways that are essentially the 6 strategies that we just discussed. Number 1, you want to simplify your tools and platforms. Several of you all indicated that when you're looking at digital marketing, it can be overwhelming, right? And so if we simplify and we use the things that are most relevant, it can help declutter your digital strategy. Secondly, focus on what actually drive results. You will need to use some data for this, but focusing on what actually drives results prevents you from spending time on things that are not giving you any results. And so use your data wisely and figure out which processes or which digital tools are actually working to get me the results. But more important, figure out what kind of results are you looking for. Again, the webinar talked a little bit about, are you looking for increased engagement? Are you looking for retention of customers? Are you looking for increased client acquisition? Or are you looking for increased sales? And depending on what you're actually looking for, then figure out what works best to drive those results. Thirdly, make your content work harder. So don't always reinvent the wheel. There's so much content that we use that we can certainly reuse and repurpose in multiple channels. And there's even content that we can spread out over the span of months or even years. Fourthly, use automation strategically. You don't want everything to be automated. We looked at the poll that we did, and several of you all saw the importance of having that human component in there. So you definitely want to use automation to assist in things and to make your time management more effective, but use it strategically so that it does not take away that human component. Then you want to let the data guide your decision making. Netflix was an example. So look at the data and say, what is this telling us? We've all seen it if we use Netflix or any of the other streaming services. When you watch a certain movie or you watch a show and you like it, or you do a thumbs down, Netflix then uses that information to make suggestions to you on things that you could potentially like, or if you didn't like it, on totally different things that you could potentially like. And so what they're doing is they're using that data to help drive their decisions and make it a little bit more personalized for the consumer. And finally, build a lean and intentional plan. When you have used all of this as far as strategies go, you want to sit back and think, what is this telling me to do? Right? Where am I trying to go? What are the goals that I'm trying to set? And it all starts with those SMART goals. If you decide that you want to increase engagement by 20% in the next 2 months, use that specific goal and build a strategy around it. Make sure, again, that you're using a SMART goal. Make sure that it is very specific. And then also importantly, that there is a time element that's on there. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this webinar today. I really do appreciate you spending your lunch hour with me. Please shoot the QR code on your screen to complete the webinar survey.
Yes, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing all of your expertise on this topic. As Sarah mentioned, we are going to go to our Q&A portion, but this QR code here is just going to link to our survey for just the content within our webinars. If you have any ideas, it's very helpful. The two questions here as well relates to the content and how you feel about it within this presentation today. Again, if you have more extra time to just scan that QR code and share a little bit more, that would be wonderful. We have a few questions here, so I'm going to leave these two questions up for our survey. And then if folks want to add a few more questions for Sarah, then we can move right into the Q&A portion here shortly. All right, so we will go now into the Q&A. Our first question we have here is, what tools or templates do you recommend that outlines a step-by-step plan using the takeaway areas?
So honestly, there isn't one that I would recommend in a broad setting. So we talked a little bit about over automation. So it's funny that I'm about to answer this question this way. But I would take your specific company and the goal that you're trying to achieve. So it's very important for you to have that SMART goal. And so I would take that specific SMART goal that you have. So let's say, for example, that you want to increase your engagement rate by 20% in the next 3 months. I would actually use AI to come up with a plan for your specific company because it's going to vary. So, for example, if I work for a very small company, right, let's say I have a client base of, I don't know, $1,000. I mean, 1,000 clients. I'm just using that off the top of my head versus a client base that is 100,000 clients. Then the strategy that you're going to use is going to be a little bit different because in a smaller company, you could probably afford to spend the time on a little bit more personalization. And for a larger company, you would need to automate some of those processes a little bit more. And so there's not really, to answer your question, a platform necessarily that I would recommend. I mean, Google has a lot of tools, obviously, but there's not really a platform I would recommend in terms of actually coming up with the strategy. I would just definitely look at whatever your SMART goal is, and then you use AI to create a strategic step-by-step plan for your specific company for that specific SMART goal.
Great, thank you for that. Our next question is, many of the examples you gave were applications of someone selling a product. Does your advice regarding enhancing marketing differ for an office trying to better market their services to bring potential clients through the door?
Actually, it is not. And so that's a great question. Yes. So a lot of the examples that I gave focuses on sales, but essentially that's what they're also trying to do, right? So take Netflix, for example, as one of the examples, or even Dollar Shave Club or any of them, Spotify. When we're looking at those examples, what they're using is they're using their current clients, right, as you quite rightly mentioned, to enhance that user experience so that they retain those clients. However, they're also still using data-driven analytics to potentially gain new clients. So, for example, if you run your data analytics and it gives you a pool of new clients, you could certainly provide things like free trial periods, right? Which a lot of streaming services or even services out there provides. You can certainly, if it's not a free trial in terms of a service, you could provide a free sample for a product, depending on your product. I work primarily in higher education, and essentially we are a service-driven industry, as you can imagine. So we are not interested in sales per se. We're interested more in the student experience and then also enrollment of students, right? And so we utilize some of these strategies certainly to capture some of that audience that we have not already captured. And you can certainly use them also to retain the part of the audience that you have already captured. So the short answer to your question is that you can certainly use them across the board to either capture new clients or to retain the ones that you have. If you're capturing new clients, you definitely want to focus on that segmentation that we mentioned and figure out where it is that you're trying to capture the new clients from specifically, which target market.
Great. I think this goes nicely into the next question. You kind of answered, I think, a little bit of that, but my role involves event management and marketing these events. As someone with no formal marketing education and little to no support staff available to assist, I'm often experimenting when it comes to marketing. Do you have any recommendations for resources or a place to start when it comes to marketing events?
Oh, yes. So you can, there's lots of resources you can use out there. So the first one I'm going to recommend is the UMN College of Continuing and Professional Studies Digital Marketing Certificate. We do have a digital marketing certificate that we are launching relatively soon that has 4 courses in it, which would be absolutely perfect for something like that because it gives you a little bit more insight into utilizing some of the digital tools. Another recommendation that I would provide is a virtual community. If you're unsure of what a virtual community is, essentially, if you go to social media or Reddit or anything like that, and you type in your interests, so in your situation, that would be event marketing, it's going to pull up different groups or different communities that focus on event marketing. And I would absolutely, if I were you, join those event marketing virtual communities because you can certainly get some ideas from other individuals that are already in event marketing, and you can even bounce your ideas off of them for specific type of events because they may have done something very similar to yours. The third recommendation obviously would be to Google examples of things that you're doing. So for example, if you're in event marketing and let's say you're hosting a fundraising event, okay? I personally, we host a golf tournament every year that raises funds. And so when we first got started on this many, many years ago, we really didn't know a lot about this. And so I just got on Google and I started Googling ideas for a golf fundraiser, like where to even start. And so that would be a third recommendation is use the tools that you have available to use. So the internet is obviously a very basic tool. Google, I would certainly recommend. AI can certainly give you some strategies on kind of implementing that or some steps to do that. But I would definitely again, look into our digital marketing certificate that we are launching here very soon. And then definitely join some of those virtual communities, not only for ideas on how to actually start the event marketing in terms of the planning process, but really just also for support systems as well.
Great. Thank you for all those resources. And as Sarah mentioned, thanks for dropping the plug, Sarah, for the digital marketing. I did link it there in the chat as well. Sarah does teach a few of those courses too. So we'll just move on now. If you did have questions following today, definitely send it to ccapsinfo@umn.edu. If you could go to the next slide here for me, Sarah.
One.
Wonderful. So CCAPS now offers flexible workforce development solutions designed to equip employees with the targeted knowledge and skills their organization needs. Our programs include industry-driven bachelor's and master's programs, along with over 15 non-credit certificates and over 90 individual classes. So if you or someone in your organization would like to learn more, please feel free to schedule a consultation with our business development manager, Beth Laurie. Her contact information is there on the slide as well, and also posted in our chat. And the next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we will send a link to the webinar recording within a week of today's webinar. The recording will be posted to our CCAPS webinar archive as well as our CCAPS YouTube page. And the University of Minnesota employees are eligible to receive well-being points for listening to our webinars. So please view the link in the form, also listed in the chat here if you want to fill out for that. And the college's contact information will also be on the last slide here. And again, reach out to ccapsinfo@umn.edu if you have any questions about our programs as well. Other than that, I want to thank you all today for joining us today. And Sarah, thank you again for sharing all of your knowledge.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Shanta. And again, thank you all for spending your lunch hour with me.
Yeah.